this week, we're going to look at some research that Lincoln University are doing. They're in the vineyard and they think that by changing the habits of the vines, they can make it work so that whatever happens climate-wise will actually sort of quietly fit in with the vines. This week people are talking about the fact that the prices are all over the place for livestock. Hiranuri Water project gets the last of its funding for the next stage. Tomato industry is joining the GIA biosecurity agreement. Hillary Clinton has got pneumonia and Bill's not quite sure where she'll put the Vicks. Mint lamb contest is now 10 years old, and a bill before Parliament to reduce rustling because there's more and more incidents of that. There are those who'll be calling for a return of the death penalty. In just a moment though, it's farm accounting. There's a so-called revolution.
Yeah, Xero, the online accounting providers, come out and said they're going to revolutionise things going forward. Obviously it's one of the most popular ones around. It's past MYOB and it's also outperforming Cash Manager, which a lot of farmers be sort of familiar with. We sort of get the argument put forward that it was designed for business and not farming, but it's definitely being used by the farming community and more so. We think it's great. A lot of different sort of outfits out there think it is. We've even got one of the major banks out there now that are actually paying for some farmers to go onto it, where they see that these farmers are struggling. It gives them a chance to keep an eye on what they're doing and sort of getting close and see what they're spending their money on without that farmer really knowing how far in they're going.
So how does it work? It's
all done in the cloud. So basically you log onto a website, very, very secure, almost impossible.
Otherwise you wouldn't be using it.
Yeah, always impossible to break into, and basically your data is fed into that, and it's just full-on accounting, so you can do invoices, record your bills, do all your GST out of it, do regular profit and losses. So it's a really powerful piece of sort of software out there.
I mean, I'd throw my arms in the air and say it's all too hard, but it's not.
Oh no, definitely not. It's very straightforward. We've even got a client where their farm manager, he gets all the bills uploaded by the admin person. He then goes and approves them for payment and someone else pays them. And all the invoices are in there. So rather than having to sit there and go through wads of paper, he just sits there at night on his iPad looking up all the bills that have been uploaded and approves them. So it's really changing the way.
And it's easy to access.
Oh yeah, yep, you can access it anywhere. So it doesn't have to be on a certain computer, so you're not actually installing software. It's all done via the internet. So you could be sitting up north somewhere away from the farm, you could be overseas even. We've got one person who manages the farm from overseas. They own it and then someone else does the work here, but they can log in and see exactly what they're spending their money on.
So you can pay your wages and all that sort of stuff?
It's got payroll built into it as well. It's got the full suite of things. It's outstanding.
So what does it cost? It must be a cost.
Yeah, it depends on what options you want. So it starts at the basic sort of $55 with no payroll and straight accounting, and from there it goes upwards. But it's money well spent. And if you're doing it, you should actually talk to your accountant first.
I was just going to say that. Talk to your chartered accountant about it.
Yeah, because there's a wee bit of setup involved. If you get that wrong, then it almost can make it worthless, or you have to spend a wee bit more with your accountant for them to fix it up. But your accountants can also offer you deals.
So this is really going to make accountants more consultants than...
Yeah,
so your bill's going to come down.
Yeah, when it first came out, people said, "Oh, this is the end of the accountants. There's going to be a dying industry." But now we've got the last laugh. No, we're now more consulting out of it because it allows us to see exactly what's happening at any time in real time. So it gives us more power to sort of get ahead. But Xero have also indicated that they're moving towards where you can actually now start sort of even looking at the credit worthiness of a farm or even a business. So they're going to go into that sort of realm, even what would happen if you go down and implement this decision and that decision. So there's a lot of extra things they're going to be moving towards where they're sort of going to be the be-all, really.
It is a revolution. Now, what's the latest with IRD? Because there's always something in that area.
Yeah, they've come out with a couple of things. The first one is if you're a trustee of a trust, or even someone else's trust, and you resign from that trust, you've got to notify them straight away. The reason being that as a trustee, you're personally liable for any GST and income tax of that trust. So if you're resigned today, but don't notify them for 2 years, during that 2-year period, you're still actually liable, even though you have got no involvement with that trust. So the day you resign, you let the accountant know and they contact IRD and get your name taken off that trust register with them.
Bit like a personal guarantee, isn't it? That's another minefield. Yeah.
Yes, and the other part of it is that August provisional payments were due back on the 28th of August. If you missed it, you're going to start getting text messages from IRD. So they're going to text you and say, hey, you missed your payment, pay it, contact us if you can't afford to pay it and put an arrangement plan in place, or estimate what your provisional tax will be for the year. That last one is of concern. If you are going down that track, you need to stop and immediately call your accountant, because if you do estimate, you can end up in a big pile of trouble if you get it wrong. It gets quite expensive. So yeah, the first thing would be, if you got that text and you haven't told your accountant you haven't paid, actually give the accountant a call and say, hey, look, I'm in a bit of strife here. Yeah. What can I do? Because
they do, if you communicate with them, they're very helpful.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Reserve Bank?
Yeah, they've just come out and said they're doing a bit of review of the 5 major dairy lending banks in New Zealand, just to see how they identify bad loans and that sort of thing. Back a while ago, they estimated about 8% of the loans to the dairy industry were going to go bad, or about $1 billion. But with the upturn, that's obviously going to come down, hopefully. But they're just going to see what the banks are sort of doing around that and sort of release their findings about December. At the moment, there's probably no effect on anyone as such in terms of lending, etc. But depending on what comes out of the review, they could look at making changes or recommendations for banks to consider for that industry.
Yeah, that's sort of crunch time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There has been a lot of sort of stuff going on behind the scenes, and I guess the Reserve Bank want to make sure these banks are properly tracking which loans are going to go bad and what write-offs are coming up, etc.
Can they do anything? I mean, if you get $1 billion worth of people being sold up.
Yeah, there's not a lot they can do, but they need to identify early and get in there and work with the people. That's the key, because we obviously don't want people going broke, and banks do have some flexibility, and it is just really a case of working together.
And once again, communication with your accountant, your banker, and anybody else like your farm consultants.
Yeah, most definitely. The more people you can tell and bring in to help you, the easier it is.
Because you do want to help.
Yes, yeah, we do. Yes, yeah, that's one of our roles.
Exactly. Thank you very much indeed, Kerry. In just a moment, we're going to be looking at export targets and when and if we're going to meet them. You're still on target for your 2025 then?
So our export double the value target is always going to be a bit of a stretch. It means that we're going to have to grow significantly. Of course, it's a bit hard when we've seen the dairy prices reduce the way that they have over the last couple of seasons. But we've got some very strong performers in the primary sector. Particularly beef farmers have had a good 12 or 18 months. The horticulture industry's grown about 20%. They're worth about $5 billion. There's opportunities for us to do more with forestry exports. There's a category in the situation outlook for primary industries called Other. That's worth about $2.3 billion, and that's grown significantly in the last 12 months as well. That's things like Manuka honey and value-add products. And we shouldn't forget seafood and arable that have got an opportunity to continue to grow. But we will need a decent tailwind for us to reach our target. But the important thing is, when we set it, we knew it was always going to be aspirational. And the really cool thing is that a lot of sectors have come forward with their own aspirational targets based on that at 2025, right down to the stone fruit sector, potatoes, onions, others. They've all set their own targets anchored around the 2025 aspirational goal. So I think that that's fantastic that a lot of the sectors and industry are focused on that target.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
What is it about local body elections that people want to totally ignore? Obviously, we've got the local body elections coming up very, very soon, and with a record which suggests that only 40% of any population, not just the rural population, but of any population, can be bothered to vote. Now, there's several things, aren't there, really? I mean, the bottom line is that you are paying rates, whether you like it or not. You're paying rates to ECAN, you're paying rates to your local council, and that adds up very, very quickly. So, when you put all that money into a pool, do you want it managed, or do you want people in there who are just doing it for their ego? I'm fair to say, I think, that invariably the only names you ever hear, as far as local body connections are concerned, are the ones that are coming up for the election, and all of a sudden you've got all this visual pollution on people's front yards and front fences and paddocks and such. Vote for Jim or Bill or Tom or Dick or Harry, and there's a photograph of them. You think, yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have recognised him if I'd ever seen him or her, and yet they're the ones who are managing your rates. They're the ones who basically is making your patch, your part of your parish, work. So please, don't you think that you should treat local bodies as importantly as you do central government? I mean, central government, everybody knows who the MPs are, well, most of them anyway. There's a lot of list ones, I guess, that may not lift their head above the parapet, but at least we do know what they are doing. Is it the fault of the media? Do the media need to get into the local councils more? I mean, they spend millions of your dollars. They've all got lovely offices. They've all got a lovely fleet of cars for all their workers. But what are they actually spending your money on, and how profitable is it? Are they actually doing what you want? Now, the bottom line is, I think you should be quietly going up to these people who have got billboards on fences and in paddocks and saying, okay, my rate bill is X numbers of thousands of dollars. What are you going to do? How are you going to spend it? How am I going to win from your spending that money? Please, treat the local bodies like you do the national ones and actually find out who is doing what. I've never yet heard of local bodies and having policies. Haven't heard it. Not being, well, I've heard that they vote for me and I will do wondrous things for you. I stand for independence and all that other stuff, but not actual policies. I think we should ask them what their policies are. Most importantly, I guess, if they have any. Just thought I'd ask that question, and please do answer the call. Ruth, ECAN is opening up again for the public to decide who should run it.
Well, we get half a vote this time. Only half the ECAN councillors will be elected, the rest will be appointed. But for me, it's a good step back to democracy. I hope that people look at the candidates, think about what they stand for and have their say. We have a woeful turnout for local body elections, just around 40%. That is abysmal, that more than half the population say we don't care who runs our local communities, who runs our city, who runs our region. They've got big jobs, ECAN. I'm outraged that the government persisted with their misinformation about why the ECAN councillors were sacked, then extended the length of time that we had commissioners, and now is only giving us half a vote back. But voting for half of them is better than nothing.
Because local bodies don't normally get very good support at the ballot box.
No, I think it's really sad that so many people don't understand how important community boards and councils, the mayor, district health boards and our regional council are. They make huge decisions that impact on our life and our well-being. We should listen to them, we should look at them and say, what do you stand for? What are you going to do for our city or our region? And then vote appropriately according to what you believe in.
Do they promote themselves enough, do you think?
Well, I think if you looked at what they might do, which is, attending meetings hosted by residents' associations, you'd notice that you'd get a really low turnout. So actually they haven't engaged the general public. Not many people will turn up to a meeting to hear a debate between different councillors and hear what they have to hear what they stand for and what they have to say. We have a mural competition in Christchurch. There's a big mural competition in Selwyn. So perhaps people will take a bit more notice where there's no incumbent as in Selwyn and say, right, we're getting a new mayor, let's have a look at all the potential. I hope they do. It's a really important job.
And then there's Auckland.
Yeah, what could we say about Auckland? I'm certainly backing Phil Goff to be the mayor. I have never known such a hard-working and passionate man as Phil. He's just tireless in his work. He listens really well. He takes on board what people say. He works out what's best, and then he goes back to people and say, here's where I've got to. And then if they agree, he gets on and does it. It's a great way of operating.
So you're saying that that's a pretty good template for others?
I think it is. I think working out what the problem is and then listening to alternatives in the solution, not just saying, here's the problem, I've got the solution. Because I tell you what, the wealth of wisdom does not reside in Parliament. People in our communities, in our workplaces, in our schools have got a lot of ideas about how problems can be solved, and often a lot smarter than politicians are. So we should listen to them, we should learn from them, and then we should act on their behalf. That's what we're elected to do.
Dennis, the season, are we kick-starting anything?
Yes, absolutely, Rob. Well, the season kick-starts things on its own. Of course, we see the blossoms coming out and leaves breaking and all the rest of it. But in the field, in terms of farming, the ryegrass needs a boost at this stage. And not only will you increase the protein and therefore the value of that grass to your stock, you'll get it cracking and it'll start to form those reproductive tillers, and that starts very, very early. And of course, wheat, it's endured the winter and it wants a bit of a lift in the spring. So yeah, nitrogen at this point, and look out for the flat weeds and look out for the potential aphid infestation of wheat.
Because aphids are already hitting. They're hitting my tulips, for goodness sake.
Yes, well, they're pretty, there's 1,300 varieties, as we know, Rob, so there's probably a tulip specialist tulip aphid. Yeah, one for everything.
Yeah, there is indeed. Yeah. Humus?
Yes, well, humus is basically the working back in of crop residues into the soil and not burning them, and that seems to be the flavour at the moment. Don't burn, but incorporate back into the soil. And of course, that has so many other side benefits that we need to really talk about them, and things like if you increase the humus content of your soil, it will be more moisture retentive, so it acts like a bit of a sponge, so that's great. Eventually that material will break down and become organic nitrogen, but there's a wee trick in between the time when it goes into the ground fairly intact and it rots down to produce organic nitrogen. It actually burns up nitrogeny bacteria in the soil, and so they get a bit exhausted if there's too much humus going in at once. For instance, a great whole lot of wheat straw or something like that. So then the trick is you have to add a bit of nitrogen to assist them to break it down to do their job.
Right.
So you need to really know what you're doing. And of course, then when you build up your humus, things like worms develop and get going in your soil, and soil structure. And as we both know, you can buy fertility out of a bag from a fertilizer company. You cannot buy soil structure. And overcultivation can kill that and cause erosion, all sorts of things. So soil structure is something we need to look after, and we do that with our rotations and the way we handle our soil.
Right. Changing the subject, you talked about aphid, and it brings into mind sprayers and cleaning them out.
Yes, absolutely, Rob. And the thing is to think about what you're doing, and the chemical you're using in a field is registered for the crop. Well, hopefully it is.
Yes.
Registered for the crop.
We will assume that it is.
We'll assume that it is. That it's registered for the crop that you're using it on, and therefore, in terms of sprayer clean down, what better place to leave it is out in the field, rather than take it back to your yard and wash it down and have it concentrate somewhere in your yard or wherever you're operating your sprayer. So the trick is to have, most sprayers these days do have a supply of fresh water, 200 or 300 litres of fresh water, which you can recirculate back through your sprayer when it's supposedly empty just as you finish the paddock, and then you can pump it round and out the nozzles and onto the crop. It'll be.
It won't dilute at that corner though, will it?
Well, you move quite quickly, and you can alter your flow rate of your sprayer, so you're hardly diluting it, and it stays in where it should be on the crop that it should be, and has the environmental fate that it should have.
Yep.
Best place for it.
Small holdings and home gardens.
Yes, Rob. Well, there's a lot of enthusiasm for beekeeping. Individual people with one hive or some with a small holding with 5 or 10 hives, and that can spell disaster to the commercial beekeepers. In particular, those home gardeners and small holders won't be in tune with controlling varroa or having to treat it. And what has and will continue to happen is that those homegrown hives will infect the commercial hives and bring pressure on them. So where it's a lovely idea to have a beehive in your backyard, you could be really detrimentally affecting commercial operators, and indeed if those varroa are not controlled in your own hive, it will probably eventually peter out. So just a wee thing.
So leave it to the professionals.
Leave it to the professionals. And again, with likes of home gardeners and seeds, beets and things, red beet, sugar beet, silver beet, that are left to go to seed and flower, they potentially that pollen can travel for kilometres and infect and cross-pollinate commercial crops. So get it out.
Yes, exactly. Just a bit of vigilance.
Eat it when you should eat it, and don't let it go to a seed crop, because when it gets to a seed crop, it can be potentially lethal to crops within 4, 5, 6, 7 kilometres of your home garden.
Especially in the more western.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, we're going to be looking at Lincoln University research, which are basically saying that they can change the growth patterns of a vineyard to suit the season. Lincoln University is doing some work on the vineyard about timing.
Yeah, I'm working on the phenological development, so different timing of different varieties in terms of when they flower, when they start the beginning of the maturation period, but also what's coming up soon in the vineyard when they bud burst, the beginning of the growing season.
You've got some interesting varieties. You've got Viognier and Chardonnay, and you've still got Müller-Thurgau.
So I haven't actually used the collecting data now a wee bit on this vineyard here, so it'll be interesting to see how the timing of these varieties perform. A lot of the work we've done is on historical data, particularly international data, where they've got years of information in terms of timing of phenology on varieties such as Müller-Thurgau, Viognier, Chardonnay and the like.
Are you expecting to find that all the different varieties have got their own time clock?
So we do know that they all have their different time clocks. So for example, in any given vineyard you'll have different timing between varieties of bud burst or flowering or veraison. So for example, Pinot Noir, it goes through flowering before, say, Cabernet Sauvignon, a variety that you'll find further up north in New Zealand.
Is climate a factor?
Climate is a key driver of our phenological models. So we spend a lot of time developing models to predict the timing of those key events, using temperature as a key driver. So internationally, that's important in the face of climate change. So there's a lot of questions. Are current varieties that we have planted now in certain regions going to be suitable in the future in that region, or do we need to start looking at varieties that are better adapted to warmer temperatures and perhaps develop later during the season?
You have people like Jim Grierson who will say that the season's 10 days behind or it's 10 days ahead.
So I think that's also a characteristic of cool climate viticulture. There's a lot of variability in our seasons, so incorporating that understanding of what's an average developmental time and then what's the variability around that time's a key part of our investigations. Can we predict with our models a huge variation in timing as well?
So what can you change with human input?
So in terms of looking at changes in development, there are management practices we can use, or changing varieties of course is your biggest change, looking at shifting what you have planted, but that's a big consideration given that a vineyard's relatively long term in terms of how long we want to keep the vines in the ground before changing them over. So alternatively we have got some what we might consider more short term adaptations that we can use, for example canopy manipulations, pruning, there's also growth regulators as well, and a lot of the work that we've done is looking at canopy manipulation, whether or not we can delay the timing of particularly later events in the season, such as the start of maturation and the maturation period itself.
We're in a region that gets frosts. Can you delay flowering?
In terms of flowering, research by other people, ex-university students, has shown that they can delay the timing of bud bursts with a small shift in flowering, but flowering is perhaps the phenological stage that's least prone to shifting by human intervention. We're more likely to shift the onset of ripening and that ripening period through, say, canopy manipulation.
You're talking about manipulating the canopy. What are you actually doing?
So trimming, so reducing the height of the canopy, leaf plucking, that's often used in the fruiting zone actually to open up and aerate the canopy. So perhaps doesn't necessarily manipulate the timing unless you do it severely, in terms of what we use in standard industry practice. Crop removal, so that can actually enable you to speed up the ripening period. So in the cool climate, sometimes we actually, if we've got a limited season in terms of having a cool year, dropping crop might be a tool in the toolbox to sort of accommodate and speed up that ripening phase.
You're thinning then in that stage?
Thinning, yeah. So those are some of the key approaches to use in terms of shifting how those later events happen in the season.
Are you able to make it either early or late?
So trimming, you're removing leaves, so there's less leaves to provide sugars predominantly to the berries, so you're actually slowing the developmental period. And dropping crop, you're just reducing the number of fruit on the vine that require those sugars, so therefore it can go on a bit quicker.
So you can do both?
You can do both.
Straight after the break, we're going to be talking with Tony Davern about such things as rua taniwha.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
Tony, rua taniwha, where are we at now?
Oh, Rob, I can't fathom how frustrated the farmers and people like the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company are about this. This whole process has been through the resource consent process. It's been to Environment Court, it's been to High Court, I think, and now it's been to Supreme Court. And the latest decision from the Supreme Court is that the Director General of Department of Conservation actually didn't have the right to do a land swap of 30 hectares of conservation land for 100 and something hectares of Smedley Farm, which butts onto the conservation area. The area that they were swapping, not the bush area, not the area in the conservation park, but the area on Smedley. It's high country. It's really difficult to farm. It's regenerating into native forest. It's going to be fenced, so it becomes part of the conservation park. And every step of the way, this decision has not been an issue, hasn't been overturned. Goes to Supreme Court, and a judge decides that he didn't have the authority to do this. Well, if he didn't have the authority to do it, shouldn't we have known that at the resource consenting process? So, yeah, I mean, look, the lawyers have had a field day. Typically, the lawyers and the judges and whoever else is involved in this, they've had a field day. They're all getting unbelievable money for what they're doing, and it's a point of law, and it's been overturned. This is not a technical issue with the dam at all. It is all about the land swap that was done so that the dam could go ahead.
So, is it scuttled?
No, look, I don't think it's scuttled. Everybody that I've been involved with up there is pretty mum about it at the moment. I'm sure they're trying to work their way, find a solution, work their way through this. I mean, I just don't know where we're at now. And I think the guys that I've been working with on the scheme don't know where they're at either. So it's a bit of a stalemate at the moment. I mean, it's only a week or 10 days since that decision came down. And so it's pretty quiet at the moment, I have to say.
Fine. Let's look at where we are at, that we
Yep.
can talk about.
Yes.
Soil moisture levels.
Yeah, look, there's, at this time of the year, we've got this little bit of panic, you know. I mean, we're getting some really nice days. Last week, we had the typical southerly come through, you know, that spring southerly. It was short and sharp, very cold. And soil temperatures just took a dump again. And soil moistures, we got enough rain out of that came through the Canterbury Plains, varies from about 16 to 35 millimetres. And so all of our soils have been returned back to field capacity. It's relatively cool. Since then, you know, if you think of what the weather was like, or actually all over New Zealand, Thursday, Friday over New Zealand, believe me, I was coming back from Hawke's Bay last Thursday, and Wellington was frigid, and you could barely stand up on the tarmac, and that continued on Saturday, so that eastern part of New Zealand eastern part of the North Island copped that all of last week. They got enough rain to top up their soil profiles again. There is absolutely no urgency at the moment to even be considering that green button that sits in the shed or is on somebody's cell phone. We're now forecast for some widespread rain over all of New Zealand on Friday. So we're only 3 days away from that arriving again, and anybody that thinks or contemplates that they're going to need to put irrigation on in the next week, and probably the next 2 weeks, probably should go on holiday and where there's no communications, or find a cave to hold it.
Wear those mitten things so that you can't push the button with your finger.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, just think about, you know, and the people. Honestly, most of the people that are panicking about this don't do any measurements. They don't know what the soil temperature is, because then they ask us what the soil temperature is, and they have no measure of soil moisture. And some of them probably don't even measure their rainfall. So, you know, I still don't understand in this modern age why people don't have measurements to actually make some decisions with. But I can assure you that right now there is no urgency to do any irrigation.
What are soil temperatures doing?
Well, soil temperatures, as I alluded to before, you get one of these cold snaps that come through, especially with some rain. It was very cold rain, almost sleety, snow in many places. I mean, if you go inland Canterbury, we had snow on the ground. You go into parts of Hawke's Bay, we had snow on the ground again. Even Wellington had, you know, high parts of the Wairarapa had snow, flurries. and snow on the ground. You know, when we get those sort of wet, cold conditions, then it has an immediate effect on soil temperature. The soils are then wet. It takes a lot more energy to raise the soil temperature when we're sitting at sort of field capacity or thereabouts than it does when we're well below field capacity, because we've got more air in the system. And they have struggled since about Saturday last week, Sunday last week, to get back even close to 9 degrees at 9 o'clock in the morning. So right now, soil temperatures are in effect inhibiting any growth we have, even though we've got some magnificent weather over the whole of New Zealand at the moment. You know, we've got to wait till we get on that continuously rising plane of soil temperatures before we're going to really see growth take off.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, we're going to be looking at the K-lines that have taken steroids. Phil, I guess K-line, everybody thinks of the small pods, but you've got bigger ones as well now.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a number of different models that go up to what we see here as almost the colossus of K-line at the top end. So if we looked at the big sprinkler and the big unit here, this is very much about getting rid of effluent in a dairy sense. So we're getting rid of, in some cases, raw effluent, and in other cases, partially cleaned effluent.
So the pink bit on the top basically says, do not drink.
Yeah, and in fact you see on the ring on the sprinkler, it actually says do not drink. This lilac colour specifies wastewater, and it's been adopted pretty much into that dairy effluent type of area.
So for the midi and the maxi, you've got different nozzles obviously.
Yeah, this is our max skid. It's connected by cam locks, and we provide to the market cam lock 63mm pipe to connect it. And then the mid skid is very much in terms of, very similar to, but a larger version, our standard K-line offering, our standard pod.
So people still use them for irrigation as well as for effluent though?
Yes, even the large unit here is in some cases used for irrigation at 40 by 35 metre spacings, or 40 metres apart. That's quite a big coverage in an irrigation sense.
Do people still shift them around behind the four-wheel motorbike?
Yes, absolutely. Although we've got people shifting them with Land Rovers and Land Cruisers and utes and all sorts of things. They're immensely robust, very, very heavy polyethylene, does make it very, very resilient to all of those issues.
Now the effluent nozzles would be very prone to having big particles come into them.
Well, you take an example of this 80 series sprinkler. Effectively the hole in that can be up to 5/8 of an inch, or 16mm roughly, which is quite a big hole. So it means that particles of very large size will actually fully escape the nozzle, which means that we get pretty good coverage. We also have a smaller version which also has the lilac cap, which does much lower nozzle sizes. That does mean then that you need some screening or primary cleaning of that liquid to actually get the right result.
So the significance of the black and the red caps?
Yeah, we have a look in the mid pod range. Effectively, we've got the black capped irrigation sprinkler, and the red cap is a different sprinkler manufacturer. That signifies a lower flow rate than this black one, which is a higher flow rate.
So it's totally foolproof really, isn't it?
Pretty much, and we, within that range, actually have quite a wide opportunity in terms of application. And then of course we've got a very tall one here which we've actually been using in maize.
So that's right above the crop?
At 2 metres it's above the crop, for the majority of the maize crop's life. So we are able to give reasonably good coverage at that sprinkler height and actually produce a very good crop without using very much of the land area as laneways.
And also, I guess, for young trees, if you've got a plantation, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely good for tall crops, whatever they might be, where you want to get the irrigation over the top. Even frost protection, I guess, is an opportunity.
And to think that that all started because a farmer went in and had a bit of an idea and needed a solution. Straight after the break, though, we're talking food safety with Joe.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
Be Active begins here, in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep-sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
Food safety, now that's part of your list of duties.
Yeah, it is. So the Food Act was implemented, the number one start date was the 1st of March. And we've had 1,000 businesses that have signed up to it since then. And they're businesses big and small. The pressure is on the most risky businesses to sign up in this first year because they have to by the beginning of March next year. And as the level of risk diminishes, those other businesses over the next 2 years after that. But if you're a new food business, then you've got to sign up straight away. Knowing that the level of risk your particular food product, food or beverage that is, represents to the domestic or international consumer will give you the degree of compliance and also the cost that's likely.
I was going to mention compliance because do people see it as just another dollop of compliance they've got to do?
Well, the old system was one size fits all. And really it was literally way overkill for some businesses at low risk. And yes, there is a cost around auditing, there is a cost around compliance, but what we've said is if your business is working well and you're doing the things you need to do, you can reduce the cost because you'll have less checks and less verification of you doing things properly over time.
And the schools, of course, they can still have their fairs and things and sell stuff.
Fundraising is exempt, and you can't get sort of a bit cute about your fundraising and have it 52 weeks of the year and still call it fundraising because that's clearly a business when you're doing it that often. But generally speaking, we say 20 times a year can still constitute fundraising, and that's exempt. Doesn't stop you from needing to do your level best that that food is safe and suitable for consumption.
Havelock North, really bad news about the water. How safe is our water?
I think as we've absorbed what's been happening up there, and it's really knocked that community hard, and clearly it will have knocked the regulators up there as well, because they'll be thinking, what weren't we doing or what got past us? Those questions are yet to be answered. But at the same time, councils around the nation are reporting on how many E. coli breaches each of them have been having, and we've seen reports about how many in Christchurch, we've seen it in Timaru as well. And so what the public are becoming aware of is that this has been managed in the past, and they now worry about whether it can be managed in the future. So the drinking water standards require a level of testing, and that level of testing depends on risk, but it also depends on the size of the population that's drinking water from that particular source. They're quite prescriptive, the drinking water standards, and I remember when they went through the Parliament, I was part of that, and there was going to be a lot of cost associated, and it's about whether you can actually get a scheme up and running if the cost is so high. But as we've seen, we need those protections in place for the public, and I guess the investigation in Havelock North will reveal what went wrong there. There's a lot of councils around the country, and regional councils as well, who want to learn from that particular operation and what went wrong, so they can be protected themselves.
Because birds and wildlife can also make water unpalatable.
Well, no, they're not. And as Nick Smith has been saying, it was last week he gave a speech, and he said that we would love all of the freshwater in New Zealand to be swimmable, because that's what the public would like to think too. It's just unrealistic, because it's not just point source discharge or stock being in waterways that contaminate it. In fact, a rain event is likely to see an E. coli breach on the part of freshwater as well. And we can't protect against rain events, actually. In places like North Canterbury, we want more rain events. But in fact, if we can achieve swimmability levels or close to it and work towards it, that's a really aspirational goal that we should be heading for most of the time, then that's worthwhile. Then you've got water bodies which maybe are exposed to geothermal activity. They're not going to be fit to swim in either. I'll tell you what, Washduck Lagoon's not that great because there's an awful lot of birds on it all of the time. I wouldn't be swimming there either.
What's been happening in the world for the last month? Because we saw you about a month ago.
Yeah, about a month ago. The world keeps turning and keeps shakily going in one direction, then coming back from the other. If you take a general overview right now, it's probably still hoping that things are going to get better and glad that they're not getting any worse. And so that's roughly where it sits. But I think that the generality is, the fallout of the earlier things. We heard this morning Cameron has resigned after the Brexit debacle, and they're still trying to say, Brexit means Brexit, but what does Brexit mean is the sort of story that's coming out of all that. May was at the G20 and talking about trade. Apparently people are queuing up to do trade deals with the UK, so the America doesn't matter and maybe Europe doesn't matter. Who knows? It's this spin around politics now. It's hard to get at the truth.
Yeah, post-truth politics is what I was trying to get at.
Right. This is this amazing development that's come out of, I guess, politics broadly, but certainly in the US. It really doesn't matter what the facts are. So a politician stands up and says, crime's getting worse. Crime's really terrible. We need to do something about crime. The facts say crime's actually getting better, or there are fewer crimes. And the politician says, well, okay, they're the facts, but I'm a politician. I speak to feelings, so it's how people feel. So the issue is now, politicians have always lied, and it's ceasing to matter anymore. That facts are not important, they speak to feelings. And if more people agree with the feelings pitch, then the politician gets elected. The difficulty then smacks everybody in the face. It's one thing having an election based on feelings, but policies based on feelings are something of a worry. And I put a link in for anybody who wants to read it in The Economist, and it's sort of the line that's starting to come out in politics. And I think it's something that we all have a responsibility to hold leaders to account, to be factual, because facts drive policy. And feelings driving policy could well turn into a world that none of us want to live in.
Let's look at the interest rates.
Well, last month we were talking just before the OCR review. The Reserve Bank cut a quarter. Some of us got a bit of reduction from the bit of relief from the banks, but not the whole quarter. And some of us were pushing for a half. As a result of that and other things in the world, we've seen the currency strengthen. So all of my export interests sort of feel a bit of pressure as a result of that. We've seen about 10% on the currency in the past 6 months. And that for some of us is 10% less revenue as a result of the changes. So that doesn't make you feel too happy.
House prices?
House prices, well, we've all seen it. You know, I think if we'd have gone back the 2014 election when David Cunliffe fell over himself around capital gains tax, if he'd said if we have a capital gains tax we won't have $1 million houses in Auckland, there might have been a completely different reaction to it. So we do still sit in that distortion. Average house price is $1 million, 10 times median wages. It's a bit of a worry, and that all of the discussion around how do people get into a market that they're not in when prices are going up far, far faster than wages are going up. That's a broader societal question that we have to address. It's that policy framework. What do we change to stop that from happening?
Yep. And investment houses, of course.
Oh yeah, I mean the Reserve Bank has changed the amount you have to put down as a deposit for, and I've put a link in for the Reserve Bank for anybody who wants to read all the boring details. But essentially, if you want to buy investment property now, you have to have a bigger deposit. And I guess we see that discussion around house prices, and we worry about house prices falling. Well, if you think about it, if you're living in a house, what the price is doesn't matter. The price only matters when you come to sell it. And then it matters more or less depending on what you're going to do. Because if you're going to buy a bigger house, the price difference is what matters from the house you're selling to the house you're buying. If you're buying a smaller house, you know, those old buggers who are maybe selling the big house to buy a smaller one, well, we might lose. Well, maybe we should. I mean, I got a free education. I got a lot of things free that the youngsters don't get today. So actually hitting the people who are going from the big houses to the smaller houses might not be a bad outcome of a general decline in house prices to bring them more into line with earnings.
Immigrants, how do that fit in?
Well, immigration is more people after more houses, and there's the element of money from offshore and whether that money is clean money and how much money is being used around the anti-money laundering or money laundering processes. You take money that is ill-gotten, you bring it into New Zealand, you buy a house, you sell the house, the money is now clean. It's not ill-gotten anymore, it came out of the New Zealand housing market. All of those add to pressures in the market.
So there are pressures out there?
Oh, there's pressures everywhere. I mean, we're not building as many as we should. And I've put a link in for that. Bernard Hickey did an analysis on how many houses we're building now compared to what we've done in the past, and that's well worth a read. We're not building as many houses, so supply is poor. We've got significant demand, immigrants, offshore money, a limited supply, and so the people who do have the money push up demand, push up price, pushing out the people who are struggling to get together a deposit and get into the entry level.
I guess it's called inflation to a degree, but wages don't seem to be moving.
Well, wages are pretty well stationary and have been now for some time. There's a movement, but we're in the sub 1% on average, and the movement of the median income to median house price in the likes of Auckland is up towards 10 now. So that's 10 times salary to buy the house. Now I remember in the dim and distant when I was being lectured as a young man, it was a long time ago.
No, not that long.
You know, it was the comment was from the old boys who I was interacting with, you know, just remember it's a year's salary on a car and it's 3 years' salary on a house. Don't break that rule and things will be fine. Now, that happened because of the rules of the game. It wasn't me deciding that. I couldn't borrow any more than 3 times salary, so that tended to lock down the prices you could afford to pay.
Very, very briefly, world markets.
As I said when we were opening, it's sort of good and bad. There's been a bit of a sell-off recently. The earlier sell-off from the beginning of the year has come back. We had more or less most markets pulling back all of the losses that they had in the early part of the year. It's softened, but we're still pretty well where we were when we opened the year. So in general, it's okay. There are question marks about the Fed, whether the Fed starts to lift interest rates and what that will do to equities and what that might knock on to everybody else. But in general, it is sort of hoping it's going to be okay, and it's not getting any worse for the moment.
John, thank you very much indeed. Now, if you'd like to recap on what John was saying, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz, and we're also on Facebook and we're also on YouTube. So we're just about everywhere. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.